What you're about to see may change your perception of what's happening behind bars.
The Channel 4 I-Team investigation exposes shocking video and photograph of what's apparently happening in our prisons. Inmates having a good time while your tax dollars pay for their food and housing. And perhaps the most stunning part of all of it is how the Channel 4 I-Team caught them. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Well, we uncovered all this simply by getting on Facebook. And you're probably thinking, well, you have to have a phone or a computer to get on Facebook, and inmates don't have either behind bars. That's the problem. These inmates are operating the pages, not someone on the outside. And what they're showing themselves doing is infuriating victims and has the state facing real questions. Prison's rough, right? You're in a cell all day, the food isn't good, little to no communication with the outside, right?
I believe I'm smoking better than everybody.
Well, welcome to Prison Life 2013. Drugs, smokes, mounds of snacks, cash, getting tattoos, the freedom to make music, even set things on fire, using forbidden technology to show it all off on Facebook.
This is the penitentiary, you hear me?
Back in there relaxing, you know what I'm talking about?
Relaxing, eating pizza, getting high, while you're paying for them to be here.
Anybody who sees those videos, they're going to be sickened by it, they're going to be angered by it.
And we're not talking about just a few inmates who figured out how to get on Facebook. Not 10, not 20, not 50. A Channel 4 I-Team investigation found more than 100 inmates in Tennessee prisons with Facebook pages. Their profile pictures taken inside their cells. Pages the inmates are operating from behind bars to communicate with family, friends, fellow gang members, even with inmates in other prisons.
I guarantee you that when the commissioner sees this, there's going to be a reckoning, and there should be.
You know, these are murderers, rapists, and other convicted criminals, and they appear to be having a pretty good time in prison.
And I don't like it, but it's a problem that we face today, and it's something that we work hard on every day.
And once you see the videos, you'll see why crime victims advocates like Verna Wyatt are infuriated. What we've uncovered is like a highlight reel of audacity.
That's the world right there.
That's convicted murderer Rivera Peoples. Here's the contraband iPhone he uses to make the videos. Listen to his buddy talk about getting high behind bars.
I believe I'm smoking better than everybody.
Then he asked Peoples about how much money he's collected while he's been in prison.
How much money you got, Phil? 1,000?
I got 1,000. I'm 1,000. I'm definitely 1,000.
And he's not alone. Here's a photo we found of an inmate holding $200, and another inmate shared the same photo on his Facebook page, just like you would share a picture you liked. But let's get back to the videos.
You see me?
Peoples and his criminal pals are back. This time, it's daytime in the prison yard, telling everyone on Facebook that life behind bars, not so tough.
Between me and you, man, you feel me? This ain't half bad.
There's video of inmates watching TV, singing and rapping.
It was so real, it fills me with this nausea.
But none of that compares to convicted burglar Martez Wright, operating his Facebook page from inside the Shelby County Correctional Center, posting videos of his exploits while in a Memphis jail. First, he shows off what he says is marijuana. Then he talks about the side effects of smoking loud, a slang term for weed.
Man, everybody in here on this stupid loud. We all hungry.
And to satisfy his munchies, take a look at his spread.
Man, we hungry. We finna get ready to eat this feast. Scrumptious items that we get that we eat on a daily basis.
What they're doing is breaking the law. They're rubbing everyone's face in it.
There's also a real criminal element to all this. The Channel 4 I-Team examined more than 100 communications and found this. 2 inmates in 2 different prisons having a conversation on the Facebook wall. One saying, "I need to get with someone at your prison, send me your number." And the other inmate posts the number to call. So here are 2 inmates communicating with each other in 2 different prisons.
Well, it is a problem. Obviously, this is instant communication.
Assistant Commissioner Tony Parker is in charge of security in Tennessee's prisons. How can a guy set a shirt on fire without your correctional officers knowing?
You have one officer and 128 inmates in a prototypical housing unit. It appears that they have took something and covered up the door.
Parker looked at every photo and every video we found. This has to be embarrassing for you.
It's something I don't like, obviously.
State investigators have combed through 14 prisons and punished 70 inmates, all because of what the Channel 4 I-Team caught them doing.
Prisoners posting on Facebook using cell phones they aren't supposed to have, sharing pictures and videos that make it appear they're having a really good time in prison. Chief Investigative Reporter Jeremy Finley is at the big board with more on what he's found.
Yeah, some of the highlights or lowlights, as you might see it, that we showed you last night. Take a look. Here are some inmates setting a shirt on fire, posting that on Facebook. Here's another inmate saying that he is high on marijuana, posting it on Facebook. Another inmate showing $200. He's not supposed to have that, again, showing it on Facebook. But honestly, you haven't seen anything yet because some of the inmates posted their phone numbers and we decided to call them to see if they'd go through. And we've obtained even more photos and they show convicted murderers living it up and showing it off to the world.
We're not going to observe Miss Sadler lying on her back. Her head was bloodied.
When Ivan Marino was convicted of strangling and murdering her grandmother, Michelle Elliott thought his days of enjoying life were over.
Yeah, when I saw him in court, I figured I'd never have to see him again.
Then the Channel 4 I-Team showed her this, Marino's Facebook page. That's right, an inmate's Facebook page. Despite being behind bars, he's posting updates, commenting on pictures, even showing himself playing the guitar. His profile picture taken inside his jail cell.
I started watering, I started shaking. I just couldn't believe I could see him again.
Marino is among the more than 100 Tennessee inmates the Channel 4 I-Team found on Facebook, operating their own social media pages, posting video, showing pictures, claiming they're using drugs, smoking, showing it off, all through using contraband smartphones. Convicted murderers, rapists, and other violent offenders enjoying all the perks of social media, including convicted murderer Brandon White, openly showing off two things you can never have in prison, his phone and his cash, $200.
That's not punishment. That is not any kind of a punishment. It's just like just being out on the outside. It's still freedom for them.
White was convicted in the murder of Linda Wright's son.
We can never communicate again, and he has access to being able to communicate with the outside world.
And there was no hiding the fact they had phones. White and several other inmates posted their phone numbers. So we decided to call them, including White. Here's the number he posted. Is this Brandon? We tried to call him back, but no one answered. The rest of our calls either went to voicemails or the phones weren't in service.
Menace to society has use of social media, and that's just wrong.
These victims' families say when the criminals were sentenced, they never imagined them watching TV or burying themselves in junk food. Is this too extravagant for a guy to have who's behind bars?
But it's obvious the inmate is trying to be flagrant and showing us all this property and all this commissary. Obviously, it's an issue.
We asked the Tennessee Department of Correction how all of this can be happening while correctional officers are watching.
It's not an issue of not enough correctional officers. It's an issue of a nationwide problem that we're facing with cell phones and the struggle to stay on top of it.
Sometimes the inmates on Facebook even surprise their own friends and family with their freedom. We found several posts with people writing on inmates' Facebook walls, "How are you locked up?" and on Facebook.
Every Department of Correction struggles with contraband. It's something that I'm not proud of, but it's a reality.
I think my first question would be, how is this happening?
Obviously, someone is bringing the phones in. The state's own records show in a year's time, only one person, Jeanette Elliott, who was visiting an inmate at Northeast Correctional Complex, has been busted for trying to bring a cell phone into a prison. But as a result of our investigation, more than 50 phones were found. As soon as the Channel 4i team brought our findings to the state, they immediately launched investigations in 14 prisons across the state, finding 53 cell phones, drugs, and a deadly weapon. 70 inmates now face disciplinary actions for having Facebook pages, and their Facebook pages now shut down. Both Marino and White's pages are now gone. Here's the thing, we've still been checking on Facebook and we continue to find more inmates with more Facebook pages. As for the TVs, inmates can have TVs, but they have to pay for them. They can also buy snacks, but they're not supposed to have that many like we've just shown you. We also reached out to Facebook for comment on that. They did not return our calls. Guys, we will continue to investigate this one.
Tonight, a state lawmaker says somebody's head should roll over what the Channel 4i team exposed last week.
Well, if you didn't see it, you've certainly heard about it. Inmates partying behind bars and flaunting it on Facebook. And now we have learned it's not that new. Locked up Tennessee inmates have apparently been accessing Facebook for years. Our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, is at the big board with the story.
Yeah, first we found hundreds of photos on Facebook, inmates posting it of themselves setting shirts on fire and claiming to use drugs. So the state swept into 14 prisons and confiscated drugs, a deadly weapon, and 50 phones. But we kept on digging, and in just the past 2 weeks, we found even more pictures on Facebook from inmates. These are all new pages. I'll just keep swiping. You'll get the idea that this problem isn't going away anytime soon.
That's the world right there.
They wanted to be on Facebook, just not the news.
Don't be on CNN in the morning, man.
But after the Channel 4i team exposed Tennessee inmates posting videos and pictures on Facebook showing them using drugs and partying, the state had Facebook shut down their pages. Problem solved, right? Not even close. The Channel 4i team continues to look on Facebook and continues to find inmates with Facebook pages, displaying their cell phones, showing off their uniforms and Facebook photos. Convicted felon Dejon Roberts posted this picture of himself after he was fresh from the gym. And his buddy Bambino Duncan, who appears to be in a county jail, writes back on his Facebook page and tells him to give him a call. West Tennessee District Attorney Mike Donovan is not amused by what we've uncovered.
It's disturbing, it's offensive.
And neither is State Representative Mike Turner.
There's no excuse for that. And somebody's head needs to roll away. Somebody needs to lose their job over this. This is so bad. This is embarrassing.
Both are now asking for meetings with Department of Corrections Commissioner Derek Schofield. Just 5 days ago, the commissioner wrote this letter to DA Donovan, writing he'd love to implement cell phone jamming technology, but the FCC won't allow it. Here's the most interesting part of the letter. While he says as a result of our investigation, 70 inmates were disciplined, the state has deactivated hundreds of Facebook accounts in the past 3 years, meaning this problem existed years before we discovered it and continues to this day.
I want to know how this happens. How does this happen? I mean, there's no excuse. You're in one of the most controlled situations out there.
State Senator Mike Turner says what we've uncovered is proof that the legislature needs to bring back the Oversight Committee for the Department of Corrections. It was disbanded during cutbacks. I also wanted to tell you about this. The Daily Mail newspaper in London wrote an article based on our investigation. The Brits are sounding off about how outraged they are over what we found. We will continue to investigate.
Well, it's a question many of you were asking after our recent Channel 4i team investigation.
Here it is. How did all of those inmates get cell phones in order to access Facebook? Tonight, the Channel 4i team has determined in many cases the correctional officers themselves are accused of bringing in the phones. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Yeah, it comes as no surprise. We found family and friends of inmates, and in some cases, prison employees accused of smuggling in the phones. But one especially caught our attention. A correctional officer assigned to an elite strike force whose job it is to seek out contraband, now suspected of trying to bring it in. To get on here, they first had to get one of these. And a Channel 4i team investigation found over and over again inmates in Tennessee prisons showing off their smartphones and posting pictures of their good times, claiming to be using drugs, hoarding food, setting a shirt on fire, communicating with inmates in other prisons, even making videos all posted to Facebook. But if you're behind bars, how do you get a phone? Department of Correction records show since 2011, 17 prison employees have been fired, accused of bringing contraband into the prison. The state's online records don't often detail what the contraband was, but in 5 of the 17 cases, they were specifically accused of bringing in cell phones or cell phone chargers.
I think from time to time, we have staff that make bad decisions.
The most recent firing and arrest of a correctional officer really gets under the assistant commissioner's skin.
I take it personal.
A correctional officer at Riverbend, Josh Jackson, was assigned to what's called Strike Force 3. They're an elite tactical group whose job it is to seek out contraband inside the prison. Jackson's termination letter shows on March 1st, after a random search on vehicles in Riverbend's parking lot, an empty phone container and marijuana wrapped in tape were found in his car. The letter reads, in discussions with an internal investigator, Jackson admitted to having met a female family member of an inmate at Riverbend and received a package of pills from her. The letter says while it can't be proven that Jackson brought the phone onto the compound and gave it to the inmate, he was still in violations of the state's policies.
If they make that choice to deal with an inmate, they're terminated and prosecuted.
We repeatedly attempted to contact Jackson for comment, but were unsuccessful. A spokeswoman for the Department of Corrections says that they passed along Jackson's case to the district attorney for possible prosecution. There is no record of him having been indicted. According to the state's records, by far the most people busted for bringing in cell phones are the family and friends of some inmates.
Tonight, the party behind bars uncovered by the Channel 4 I-Team has prompted an internal memo from the commissioner of the Department of Correction.
It's a memo now obtained by the Channel 4 I-Team. It reveals the commissioner telling what must be done to stop the party. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley has the latest.
The memo was sent just 6 days ago to the commissioner's staff. One prison reform organization calls it damage control.
I believe I'm smoking better than everybody.
The videos inmates made bragging about their drug use. The photos of prisoners hoarding food, giving each other tattoos, burning a shirt, posted to Facebook from behind bars. All of it exposed by the Channel 4 I-Team. It's now prompted this memo from Commissioner Derek Schofield, writing, quote, recent news coverage regarding cell phones in prisons portrayed a negative image of our work to control contraband. We don't make excuses for it.
I think he is trying to do a little damage control in terms of letting employees know they need to be more diligent.
Our ongoing investigation revealed last week how a correctional officer assigned to an elite task force charged with uncovering contraband was fired on March 1st, accused of smuggling in weed and perhaps even a cell phone. The commissioner writes, quote, while there are always things we can do better to enhance our supervision, we must not forget the vast majority of our employees are dedicated to doing what's right.
Yes, there's been some negative publicity, and we just need to be more careful about what we're doing.
The commissioner also warns with the summer months approaching, there will be increased chances for offenders to spend time outside and attempt to get outside fences. Review your post orders, over-communicate with each other, and challenge the status quo. The commissioner also claimed in the memo that many of the displayed pictures we found were dated and not taken inside state or private prisons. But all of the photos we found were posted on current Facebook pages until we alerted the state to them, and then they took them down. There was one video posted to an inmate's page taken while he was inside a Memphis jail, and we reported that clearly. But the other videos all came from inside state prisons. A spokeswoman for the Department of Corrections says the commissioner had no comment on the memo.
Tonight, the Channel 4 I-Team has found the party behind bars still underway.
And this time, people on the outside claim they're being harassed, even threatened. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley is here now with the latest.
Well, inmates partying it up and posting it on Facebook may be an insult to their victims, but a Channel 4 I-Team investigation found there are also new victims. A warning, what you're about to see may not be appropriate for all viewers, but it stands to show the real impact of these phones.
There he is right there.
Lisa Thompson thought it was odd that her cousin Eddie Phillips had a Facebook page while behind bars. But when he actually called her, she wondered just how much freedom he had.
He said that he could get anything that he wanted.
And then came the texts. They were harmless at first, but she started getting texts asking if she had friends who would send sexy pictures, then asking for sexy pictures of herself. She pointed out how disgusting that was coming from her cousin, and the response, "I'm his cellmate. Your cousin lets me use his phone."
And that did it. I said, don't text me again.
But the texts kept coming. "I want to see you naked. I will send you one of me naked."
It was terrible. I felt harassed.
Her response, "Stop sexually harassing me." She says she called the warden and the state.
Nothing has been done about it.
Then she got a call from someone claiming to be an inmate, saying Lisa's family needed to put money in a prepaid card or her brother, who was also in prison, would be killed by gangster disciples. Her text, "Please don't hurt him. I will give you $25 next week." The inmate later responded, "What did your mom say? I need that green dot money pack card today." She wrote back, "Stop threatening me." We brought all this to the Department of Correction. Just as we did with all those photographs and video we found of inmates' behavior behind bars. A state spokeswoman said the commissioner would not answer our questions, but confirmed that 10 days after we shared these texts with them, this man, inmate Dennis Boykin, was found with a cell phone and admitted to texting Lisa Thompson, but nothing threatening, he said. Boykin is in the same unit with Thompson's cousin Eddie, who was caught with a phone back in January. But guess what? That didn't stop Eddie Phillips, because once he got a new phone, he even texted about that too, writing, "Got caught with a phone."
Do you think that the prisons are taking this seriously enough?
No, I don't.
A Department of Corrections spokeswoman just told me that they do not consider the texts about the money card to be threats, that it was prison jargon that Lisa Thompson must have misunderstood. We've got another troubling development. Lisa Thompson had another brother who died in that prison, and the way she found out about his death, a text from prison. Just last week, we told you of a Middle Tennessee family who's receiving threatening and sexually harassing texts from prison inmates who've obtained cell phones. Now, another woman has come forward saying she too is being harassed by cell phone from the man who knocked out her front teeth. And we've obtained new photographs of just how big this problem is. Not 5, not 10, not 20, but 40 cell phones smuggled into the West Tennessee State Penitentiary. Photos obtained by the Channel 4 I-Team from inside the prison show it's not just phones, but phone chargers, drugs, and tobacco. And the man accused of smuggling it all in, Corporal Lonnie Rogers, a correctional officer in the prison. Rogers is the latest state employee charged with sneaking in phones.
Ain't half bad.
The types of phones the Channel 4 I-Team has uncovered that enabled more than 100 Tennessee inmates to document their parties and drug use on social media. And these photographs aren't the only indication it's an ongoing problem. Check out this Tennessee inmate named Justin. The Channel 4 I-Team found him on a dating website. His profile picture for the site taken inside his cell from a cell phone. Ladies, he's single, but not available yet.
He's gonna get me too, and I'm scared to death.
And Norma Pendleton is joining others on the outside who say they're being harassed by inmates through cell phones. Pendleton is divorcing her husband and got an order of protection after he was charged and indicted with busting in her door, hitting her so hard that her front teeth, that she was once so proud of, were knocked loose. The assault charge sent him back to Riverbend Prison, where he was serving time for murder.
And that will be the number there.
So imagine her surprise when an unknown cell phone number showed up on her phone, and she says her husband was on the other line saying this.
Oh, how much, is it going to take for you to drop these charges?
Pendleton wants the state to now reinstate the Oversight Committee for the Department of Correction, saying agency officials don't understand how innocent people are suffering from devices bringing so much fun and freedom to criminals.
People are scared, but really, they ain't been in this predicament. You know what I'm saying? They ain't been beat up or hit or, teeth, loosened out of their mouth.
Pendleton says she has repeatedly called Riverbend's warden and assistant warden to report the calls she says she's received, and she has heard nothing back. Now, we want to ask the state about these cases of harassment we've learned about, but they've denied our requests for interviews.
Now to the Channel 4 I-Team investigation that launched a TBI investigation into one of the state's most secure prisons.
Tonight, you will see and hear how the Channel 4 I-Team collected phone calls and texts that exposed the lack of security in what's supposed to be one of the most secure prisons in the state. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Well, all this year, we've been showing you our investigation into the party behind bars, how Tennessee inmates are using cell phones to document their wild behavior. We showed you how innocent people are being harassed and how dangerous deals were being made between prisons. Well, a few months ago, I got an interesting proposition from an inmate inside Riverbend Maximum Security Prison. Did I want to see how easily they smuggle in cell phones? That offer led to this Channel 4 I-Team investigation. If Riverbend Maximum Security Prison is so secure, how did an inmate send the Channel 4 I-Team these pictures from inside? How did we have dozens of conversations while he's locked up in here? You and I right now are talking, and you're in Riverbend.
I'm sitting in my cell on a cell phone talking to you doing this interview.
The answer is obvious. Inmate David Faulkner gets cell phones smuggled to him. And we're about to show you how he says he gets them. It all started in September when I started recording conversations with David Faulkner. He sent me pictures of his cell, the prison, his stash, his tobacco, and then this note that gave instructions of how Faulkner was to get another phone. $400 wrapped in plastic, $200 extra for weed. Let me know ASAP before I leave tonight. Signed, Simmons. Who is Simmons? Faulkner says he's a correctional officer.
Over the last 18 months, I've probably bought 20 phones from him, probably 1,000 packs of cigarettes, probably at least a pound of weed.
Hoping that coming forward with what he knows would get him moved out of Riverbend into another prison, Faulkner enlisted the help of his fiancée, Sandy Jordan, to give all his information to the State Department of Correction.
They basically all just kind of laughed at me. They didn't feel that there was any credence to this.
So Jordan and Faulkner began to work with the Channel 4 I-Team to gather more information, starting with texts of how to arrange getting a phone inside the prison.
A guard was texting me during his shift.
When Jordan suggested they meet at her hotel near the prison, the text reply, "Too close to work. That's way too risky." That's when Jordan made a bold move and recorded the conversation with the guard.
I have a lot to lose to do something like this.
You take a risk just like I do.
I'll be honest with you, it scares me.
We both have a lot to lose.
And it can be anything I want, phone, weed, anything that he needs, right?
Yeah.
The cost for the contraband, $3,000.
Like I said, I don't mind helping him out, but because of what it is, it has to cost him because of the risk that I take.
Then another request by text. "I want to know what you look like." Jordan responded, and this picture was sent in return. The TBI confirms that's Kevin Simmons, a correctional officer at Riverbend Prison. When the Channel 4 I-Team brought all this to investigators with the Department of Correction, they contacted the district attorney, who called in the TBI. That's when the TBI asked Jordan for her help.
I wanted to make sure that they knew that we had this kind of leverage that they needed to act.
The TBI confirms to the Channel 4 I-Team they took Jordan to this hotel in Mount Juliet, and she arranged for Simmons to meet her. Inside the hotel, the TBI confirms they gave Jordan $3,000, a cell phone and tobacco to give to Simmons. And Jordan says as soon as the transaction was made, TBI agents moved in.
They came into the room as soon as he had the money, placed a gun straight to his head, which was quite shocking to me.
Afterwards, Simmons was fired by the Department of Correction. The TBI's case is now in the hands of the district attorney. After repeatedly trying to reach Simmons at his last known address and by phone, I just spoke with him this afternoon. Simmons denies writing this note and says he didn't intend to deliver the phone to David Faulkner. For now, that's all he will say. Jordan says the TBI has their work cut out for them.
I believe they want to get the network within the prison because there's more people involved.
We repeatedly asked for an interview by the Department of Correction, but they refused, instead sending a statement that reads in part, quote, "Although we will not discuss the specifics of this particular investigation at this time, we feel our investigative staff took a progressive stance while collaborating with other law enforcement agencies, specifically the TBI. We are concerned about any corruption, and we realize from time to time a few employees will make poor decisions that lead to policy violations."
Now to some video obtained by the Channel 4 I-Team that shows what one inmate calls proof of out-of-control correctional officers in a state prison.
The video has become part of a lawsuit against the state, and the inmate who is suing says the state is offering a lot of money to settle. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Well, the video you're about to see raises questions if correctional officers went too far to control an inmate and if the injuries he sustained were ignored. The tactics were only supposed to subdue an inmate. Instead, what happens in this video obtained by the Channel 4 I-Team launched a lawsuit and prompted a settlement offer from the state worth more than $80,000. And what happens at the end of this video alarms this former inmate and prison watchdog.
That is a gross departure from professional correctional practices.
What you're watching is called a cell extraction. That's when prison officials feel an inmate is harming himself or others. It's November 25th, 2009. The cell extraction team at West Tennessee State Penitentiary moves in. Inmate David Faulkner is inside. You can see the blood on the cell window. Faulkner was cutting himself. He's hit with a taser, and guards swarm on top of him. It all appears to be done completely by the book. But when Faulkner is made to stand up, look at his eye and listen to what he says when he's immediately brought before a nurse.
Kick me in the face twice. Ain't nobody kicked you in your face. Kick me in my face twice.
In an interview from a contraband cell phone, Faulkner says this is what one of the officers said to him.
He says, "I told you we was going to teach you a lesson," and he raised his right boot back, and he kicked me right in the face.
Did you ever lay a hand on any guard?
Absolutely not.
He broke my jaw.
Faulkner complains of that, a dislocated shoulder, and a swollen eye and nose. When Faulkner is examined by a nurse, listen to what she says.
Ain't nothing broke.
Faulkner is then taken back to a cell, and what happens next is what alarms prison watchdog Alex Freeman. Watch as Faulkner is hogtied, his hands and feet bound, and laid on his stomach.
There is a large body of research that this type of restraint can lead to death. A very dangerous technique, widely recognized as something that you shouldn't do.
Faulkner says he was hogtied for 4 hours, and when he was later checked on by another officer,
he took a look at me and said, "Call an ambulance."
Faulkner was then taken to the hospital. And remember what this nurse said?
Ain't nothing broke.
Faulkner's medical records show a doctor found he had a broken nose, possible facial fractures, and a dislocated shoulder, and he had those injuries all while he was hogtied for hours in a prison cell. The Department of Correction denied our request for an interview because Faulkner is now suing. But in court filings, the correctional officers involved deny that Faulkner was severely beaten or that they used any more force than what was necessary. And a nurse who is being sued denies that she disregarded an excessive risk to Faulkner's health. Yet Faulkner did provide this, a letter from the state's attorney, indicating the state at first offered $50,000, then $65,000, then $85,000 to settle, writing, "We admit no fault under this agreement. It will benefit all parties to settle before trial."
But certainly the state sees enough merit or enough threat in the litigation to merit a settlement.
Now, we reviewed the Department of Correction's use of force protocol. There is no mention of hog-tying as either an acceptable or unacceptable use of a constraint. We're going to see how this one plays out in court.
The commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Correction was on Capitol Hill today for budget hearings.
It comes just a day after our Channel 4 I-Team investigation raised serious questions about what's happening inside some of its prisons. And our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, was there with lots of questions for the commissioner.
Yeah, this was the first time we've been able to get to Commissioner Derek Schofield. We'd asked for interviews with him and were either denied or given an interview with someone from his administration. And as we saw today, the commissioner wasn't quite ready to talk.
We want to utilize our resources.
Commissioner Derek Schofield had no problem answering all kinds of questions from Governor Haslam today about his budget. And we were there too, with questions of our own. Questions about our year-long investigation into the party behind bars in Tennessee prisons, including how we continue to find, to this day, inmates getting on Facebook and displaying their sometimes wild behavior, like setting shirts on fire and bragging about drug use in videos. Questions about innocent people being harassed by inmates through social media and through cell phones. Questions about how we gathered alarming conversations and texts about what appears to be a correctional officer making a deal with an inmate to get a cell phone inside Riverbend Prison. And the TBI ended up conducting a sting on the officer, who was then fired. And finally, questions about the alleged beating of an inmate by correctional officers, who was hogtied afterwards despite his injuries. We can't say, though, if that's the reason why the commissioner didn't appear to be too thrilled to be talking to the media after his budget hearing.
I'm going to start by asking some questions about the cell phones. We've been doing a lot of stories about this.
I understand. Can we talk about budget today?
I got questions for you as well about the cell phones. So if these want to ask about that, it's fine.
We'll do a separate one for you.
And we didn't mind to wait to do a separate interview. After all, he brought up something in his budget request about a salary survey for corrections officers. That was key. We'd heard repeatedly that the reason so many correctional officers have been busted carrying in cell phones is that they need to make extra money because their salaries are too low.
Because that's something that has to happen in order to get more of the issues under control.
You make an assumption that more of the issues under control. I think we have our prison system under control. What we do in the community is under control.
Once the budget questions were over, we were ready for our interview.
All right, Commissioner, we do an interview over here.
But it appears we misunderstood.
Today he's saying we're doing budget. On the other issue, we'll talk to you at another time.
And there goes the commissioner right into the elevator. And we are going to hold the commissioner to his word that he will do an interview at some point. We also wanted to share with you something else. Now, we asked the Department of Correction for an interview to discuss both the lawsuit filed against the Department of Correction about the alleged beating of the inmate and how the inmate says he was sent a settlement offer from the state. Well, the Department of Correction refused to talk to us because it was pending litigation. But today, the Attorney General's office disputes that settlement, saying they never sent it and it didn't come from them, but it has the senior counsel's name and signature on it. We spoke with the inmate, David Faulkner, and he says that settlement offer came to him in the mail. We are continuing to investigate what's behind this as well.
Now, the correctional officer exposed by the Channel 4 I-team earlier this week for allegedly arranging to smuggle a cell phone into Riverbend Prison is now in jail himself. TBI agents arrested Kevin Simmons today. Our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, is now here with the latest.
Well, so imagine the turn of events for Kevin Simmons. Just a few weeks ago, he was making sure inmates stayed locked up at Riverbend Prison. Tonight, he is behind bars after being indicted by a grand jury. From correctional officer to jail inmate, Kevin Simmons is in the Wilson County Jail tonight, charged with official misconduct, all following a Channel 4 I-team investigation that exposed texts and recorded calls from Simmons himself. Recordings that appear to capture Simmons making a deal to smuggle a cell phone to an inmate inside Riverbend Prison.
I don't mind helping him out, but because of what it is, it has to cost him because of the risk that I take.
The Channel 4 I-team spent months working with Riverbend inmate David Faulkner and his fiancée Sandy Jordan to expose the cell phone smuggling inside the prison. Jordan recorded a conversation with someone who called himself Kevin Simmons.
I have a lot to lose to do something like this.
You take a risk just like I do.
I'll be honest with you, it scares me.
We both have a lot to lose.
After the Channel 4 I-team took our recordings as well as texts and a note Faulkner says was written by Simmons to the state, the TBI stepped in and used Jordan to set up a sting at this Mount Juliet motel. The TBI now confirms Simmons agreed to sneak a pack of tobacco, perfume, a cell phone, a card with cell phone minutes, and a note into Riverbend in exchange for $3,000. Simmons tells the Channel 4 I-team he never intended to carry in the cell phone into prison, but this recorded call before the sting raises some serious questions.
And it can be anything I want, phone, weed, anything that he needs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
At last check, Simmons is still in the Wilson County Jail. He was fired by the state after that sting. We also wanted to tell you about the latest on another part of this investigation. Now, the inmate in this case, David Faulkner, is suing the state after he says the correctional officers beat him, then hogtied him afterwards. He provided us a letter saying it was an offer from the state to settle for $85,000. But the Attorney General's office now disputes that letter, saying it was written by Faulkner and it is a fake. Well, today we learned the Attorney General did send a letter to Faulkner earlier this year offering to settle the case in exchange for reducing basically what Faulkner owes in copying fees. Well, Faulkner rejected that offer. Faulkner maintains he received all of these offers in the mail, and he says he doesn't know where they came from. The TBI is now investigating this part of the story as well.
There's been a house cleaning of sorts at one of the state's biggest prisons. An internal memo obtained by the Channel 4i team shows a special operations unit swept Riverbend just about 24 hours ago.
They were searching for contraband, including cell phones. Now, that move follows our latest Party Behind Bars investigation that exposed how cell phones were being smuggled into the prison. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley's here with what he's uncovered now.
This memo from Commissioner Derek Schofield states Monday's sweep is part of their, quote, enhanced efforts to address contraband. Well, tonight, for the first time, you will hear how a former Riverbend inmate got heads up about upcoming cell phone searches and how he says he was able to hide phones even during the sweeps. According to the internal memo, 80 members of the Special Operations Unit conducted a comprehensive search for contraband in Riverbend Monday. The memo goes on to say additional entry points of Riverbend, the Sally Port and Checkpoint, will now be under control of Special Ops effective Monday. And it appears the screening we all go through at the airport could soon be introduced at Riverbend. The memo says as part of the battle against contraband, the state is installing some kind of advanced imaging technology at the prison, all for what's supposed to be the most secure prison in the state. A prison the Channel 4i team found so unsecure, we were able to have multiple conversations with inmate David Faulkner through a contraband cell phone and receive pictures and texts of what was happening inside. Conversations that ultimately led to a TBI sting on former Riverbend Correctional Officer Kevin Simmons, who is now charged with official misconduct after we obtained a recorded call of him explaining how to get a phone inside the prison. For the first time tonight, you'll hear how Simmons tells Faulkner's fiancée how he warns Faulkner when a cell phone sweep is coming.
You need to find you a hiding spot because you know they're going to come in, they're going to check you. I try to give them a heads up as much as I can.
Also, listen to how Faulkner told me how they work with other inmates to hide the cell phones.
You wrap your phone up in your laundry bag and you give it to that inmate and he'll take it out there and hide it until the strike force leaves and then he'll bring you your phone back.
And you may remember this from last week when the commissioner told me we'd do an interview about the cell phones after he talked about his budget. I got questions for you as well about the cell phone, so if these people want to ask about that, it's fine.
We'll do a separate one for you.
I said a separate one for you. Well, you may recall the commissioner then headed directly to the elevator after that press briefing. I was told that I misunderstood, that we would mean that we would do an interview later. Well, I asked again today for an interview and was told he was in a conference until Thursday.
For the first time today, a former correctional officer went before a judge.
The Channel 4i team first exposed Kevin Simmons, who was caught in a TBI sting, allegedly trying to smuggle contraband into prison. And today, the Channel 4i team had some tough questions for him. Our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, now. Jeremy?
Well, Demetria, this is the first time we actually came face-to-face with Kevin Simmons. But it's not the first time we've heard his voice. Our investigation gathered cell phone recordings and other documentation that led to a TBI sting and ultimately the felony charge he now faces.
Kevin Simmons.
The cell phone conversation obtained by the Channel 4i team indicates former correctional officer Kevin Simmons can be quite the talker.
You take a risk just like I do.
I just give you the cash.
If you just give me the stuff he wants, I'll worry about trying to get it wrapped up in stuff.
But today, outside of court, not so much. Do you want to tell me what happened?
No, I do not.
Simmons is now charged with a felony, official misconduct, after the Channel 4i team gathered cell phone conversations, texts, and other documentation that appear to reveal how cell phones were being smuggled into the state's most secure prison. When we presented our findings to the state, the TBI set up a sting at this motel, and agents say Simmons took thousands in cash in exchange for delivering a cell phone and other contraband into the prison.
You don't want to say anything about what happened in that motel room?
Nope. And as for that one conversation about smuggling contraband to inmate David Faulkner,
The predicament he's in, we both have a lot to lose.
It appears when I listen to this, it sounds like that you are making this deal to get this cell phone into the prison.
I'm not answering no questions. I told you that already.
It appears you're in quite a bit of trouble.
The world sees a lot of things in what appears to me and what not appears to be. Your assumption is your assumption, and the world assumption is the world's assumption. My assumption is different.
Simmons says he will talk to us after his case is finished.
I'm 13 years military. I'm a man of my word. So I will contact you after this is over with, and when you will sit down, because we have a lot to talk about, trust me.
Is there widespread corruption in that prison?
I'm not going to answer any more questions.
All that happened today in court was that Simmons was appointed a public defender because he now says he's out of a job. We also want to tell you that today the state swept through 6 prisons looking for contraband. They arrested a delivery truck driver who they say tried to deliver cell phones, cigarettes, and alcohol to a Memphis prison.
If you thought the party behind bars couldn't get any more outrageous, listen to the latest findings of our Channel 4i team investigation.
Tonight, the Channel 4i team has more evidence of inmates living it up on your dime. It comes as a move by the FCC today could help put a dent in the online antics of some criminals. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley is here now with the latest.
Well, hey, you already know that we found photos and inmates of inmates just having a great time while behind bars on Facebook. Well, just today, we found them also on Instagram. And they're not just showing any signs of slowing down their efforts to show off their good times.
That's the world right there.
If Tennessee's prison inmates need a social media guru, Rivera Peoples would be it. You see, he's moved on from posting videos on Facebook. Now Peoples is on Instagram, the popular social media photo sharing site. There he is working out. There he is flashing cash. There he is on Channel 4. Yeah, he took a picture of himself from one of our promos and put it on Instagram. That means inmates continue to get on social media on their contraband cell phones, even after the state swept through 14 prisons and confiscated phones following our investigation. The question is, will a decision by the FCC today make a difference? Critics of prisons have long claimed because the landline phone calls made from prison are so expensive, inmates often have no choice but smuggle in cheaper cell phones. How expensive? Just to connect in Tennessee is $3.62. It's 62 cents for every minute. A 30-minute call can cost a prisoner, or more likely their families, $22. The FCC said today that's outrageous.
Too often, families are forced to choose between spending scarce money to stay in touch with their loved ones or cover life's basic necessities.
And the State Department of Correction has cashed in on the costs, contracting out through a private phone company and earning more than $2 million last year on the calls.
Tennessee, like most states, has inflated phone rates because the state gets a commission kickback from the phone company.
But will lower rates make a difference? The state of New York thinks so. In filings to the FCC, the state's Department of Corrections stated after they lowered phone rates, it contributed to a lower rate of illicit cell phone use. Last year, less than 100 cell phones were confiscated in New York State prisons. Keep in mind, after our investigation aired, that the state of Tennessee found 50 cell phones in just one raid. Let's take a look at the comparison. In Tennessee, it is roughly now 62 cents a minute to make a call. The highest the FCC says a call can now cost will be 25 cents. You can see the difference of what that's going to cost for families. Now, we did contact both the Department of Correction and the private phone company they contract with, Global Tellink. The state did not respond, and Global Tellink said they could not comment on the order.
We are getting a real indicator of just how big of a problem illegal cell phones are in Tennessee prisons. But we never knew just how many cell phones were being slipped into prisons until tonight. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
That's the world right there.
We knew the inmates were getting them. We just didn't know how many they were getting until now.
They brought us almost 4,000 old phones that they've confiscated from people in their system.
An event to celebrate a partnership between the YWCA and the State Department of Correction revealed just how many illegal cell phones have been found in Tennessee prisons in the last 5 to 6 years. An estimated 4,000 phones smuggled in to inmates.
We'd be able to take these phones out of the prisons and to stop or prevent them from being used for illegal activity.
This year, the Channel 4 I-Team has been investigating and exposing how these phones are helping to create a party behind bars for Tennessee inmates. Our investigation showed how inmates were using the phones to document their drug use and freedom, even communicate on social media with friends and other inmates. We found innocent people harassed and threatened by inmates by phone. When our investigation first aired, the state swept 14 prisons and found more than 50 phones. We thought that was a lot. Turns out it was just a drop in the bucket. These piles of phones shows what the state is grappling with because someone is bringing them in. Our investigation found in several cases it was correctional officers themselves.
It can be visitors, it can be staff. Cell phones in prisons is a problem nationwide.
These phones were just sitting in a storage room until the idea came up to gather them and sell them. What was once contraband for inmates to enjoy social media and make drug deals will now raise money for the YWCA's anti-domestic violence programs.
Well, the crackdown on contraband continues in Tennessee's prison system. The Department of Correction says 4 visitors at 4 different prisons were arrested trying to bring in prohibited items. 2 of the suspects had marijuana. 1 had prescription narcotics, and the 4th had pot, a cell phone, and 2 flash drives with pornography on them. The crackdown comes after a year-long investigation by the Channel 4 I-Team into how prisoners are using cell phones to communicate with each other, flaunt their parties, and even harass innocent people from behind bars. A recent I-Team investigation exposed how cell phones were being smuggled into the state's most secure prison, prompting the arrest and indictment of a correctional officer.